The silver knife trembled in my hand as laughter rippled across the table. It was the kind of laughter that sliced cleanly, polite, practiced, poisonous. Danielle always knew how to deliver the line with perfect timing. "It's just sad," she said, eyes glinting like the crystal glass in her manicured fingers, "that some people never reach their potential." Her gaze slid toward me, soft and cutting all at once. "Maybe Madison should talk to you, Mr. Clayton. Your company's mailroom probably pays better than teaching." The laughter came on cue. Mr. Clayton, her boss, chuckled into his wine. My parents exchanged that look, the one that said, "Here we go again." The one that carried years of silent comparison, of disappointment they never tried to hide. I smiled the way you do when a storm hits, but you're already drenched. "I'm fine where I am," I said, keeping my tone light. My phone buzzed in my pocket, the fourth urgent email from my board about tomorrow's acquisition. The deal that would finalize at sunrise if I just pressed send. The deal that would make me their boss, but no one at that table needed to know that. Not yet. Mom dabbed her lips with a linen napkin. "You're always so independent," she said, which in my family translated to "you make us uncomfortable." We set up the guest room for Danielle and Adam, of course, but the garage has a space heater. "You'll be cozy enough." The table fell quiet. Uncle Phil coughed into his drink. Danielle smirked, eyes flicking over my plain sweater, my $40 thrifted boots. "It's cute, Maddie," she said. "You've always been good at making do." I felt the air tighten around me. The same old script, the same lines. The failed daughter, the underachiever, the afterthought. If only they knew that the modest teacher they pitied controlled more market value than everyone in that dining room combined. But I stayed silent, cutting my turkey into neat, identical pieces. I'd learned long ago that real power doesn't shout, it waits. After dinner, Danielle led me through the hallway toward the garage. "Sorry it's cold," she said, gesturing to the military cot wedged between boxes of Christmas decor. "We figured you'd be fine. You're used to simpler things." I glanced around at the chipped concrete floor, the flickering bulb, the faint smell of gasoline. "It's fine," I said again, but my voice was colder than the air. As soon as the door shut behind her, I pulled out my phone. 3 messages from my executive assistant. "Mr. Clayton keeps requesting a meeting with Orion's CEO before tomorrow's board presentation. Should I tell him you're unavailable?" I typed back, "Tell him I'm still in London. Let's make tomorrow interesting." Then I stared at the cracked ceiling, the hum of the space heater filling the silence. The irony almost made me laugh. The man who laughed at me over Christmas dinner would wake up tomorrow to discover that his mystery CEO was the woman his employee made sleep in a garage. I set the phone on my chest and smiled to myself. This was the last time I'd let them write my story for me. But what I didn't know was that by tomorrow night, none of us would ever look at each other the same way again. I woke up to the metallic ache of cold air in my throat and the tick of the space heater straining against December. The garage door rattled when the wind pushed at it, and somewhere above my head, a box labeled Xmas Lights 2009 breathed dust into the cot where my shoulders barely fit. The scent of motor oil and damp cardboard carried me straight back to childhood, me doing homework at the kitchen table while Danielle rehearsed for a school play. Mom telling me to be supportive as I redid the budget so the power wouldn't get shut off. Different year, same choreography. My phone screen lit my palm in the dark. 5:12 a.m. An overnight note from legal slid into my inbox, crisp as hospital corners. "Orion, divided by Claymore closing packet, is ready for signature. Recommend executing at 9 a.m. EST. Board Zoom at 8:30 to confirm language." I rubbed a fingertip along the edge of the screen, absorbing the words like a warm drink. Power, when it's real, doesn't make noise. It just arrives on time. I pulled on a sweatshirt and slipped into the kitchen. The house was quiet except for the low murmur of the heater vents and the grandfather clock measuring out our family's impatience. I brewed coffee and stood at the window, watching the sky lighten over the snow-dusted backyard. Across the fence, the neighbor's inflatable Santa tilted like he'd had one too many eggnog. Americana. Imperfect and beautiful. Dad shuffled in, robe tied too tight the way he wore his disappointment. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, reaching past me for the mug with the Hasson Grandpa decal. He isn't a grandpa. He just likes trophies, even ceramic ones. Big day, I said. Neutral, non-threatening, the family dialect for survival. He took a cautious sip and nodded toward the garage door. Sorry about the arrangements. Danielle needed the room, big promotion, big stress. You understand. I set my cup down and let the silence stretch. A younger version of me would have rushed to fill it with reassurance, a peace offering. The woman in the dim morning light didn't. I do understand, I said finally, more than you think. By 8, the house smelled like cinnamon rolls and approval. Mom moved through the kitchen in pearls and a sweater set, the uniform of a woman who believes good manners can varnish over bad priorities. Don't be late tonight, she chirped. Mr. Clayton is joining us again for the Christmas Eve dinner. Danielle wants everything perfect. Perfect. Of course. I took my coffee to the deck and opened my laptop to the private portal layers of holding companies braided under Orion's banner. All legal, all clean, all mine. I scrolled past a dozen entities until I found the one that mattered today. ORH Acquisitions 2, LLC. Like a nerve tucked behind bone, it carried everything without revealing itself. A cardinal landed on the fence, bright as a spill of paint against the snow. I watched it hop, stubborn and alive, and thought of the day I stopped asking my family for permission to be myself. It wasn't a single moment. It was 1,000 small ones. Skipping the office holiday party to finish a pitch deck, learning Delaware corporate law at midnight with cold pizza and a highlighter, wearing Old Navy to meetings while billionaires assumed I was the assistant. Let them. It kept the work pure. In the reflection of my screen, I saw my own face older than the last time I looked closely, steadier too. I clicked join on the board call. Boxes popped into place. Legal, strategy, risk. My general counsel nodded. Morning, Madison. We're greenlit. One signature triggers the board notice to Claymore. Their CEO's been trying to reach you since dawn. I leaned forward, letting the quiet fill my voice. He can wait, because this year I wasn't going to hide. I was going to turn on the light. But none of them knew that the teacher in the garage had built the company that signed their paychecks, and by nightfall, I'd make sure they found out in front of everyone. The rest of the morning moved in slow motion, as if time itself was holding its breath. By the time Danielle's laughter echoed down the hall, bright, performative, perfect, I had already executed the documents that would send shockwaves through her office. The acquisition was official. Claymore Corporation, the pride of her career and her boss's empire, now belonged to me. My fingers lingered on the mouse after I hit confirm transfer. There was no celebration, no champagne, no applause, just the quiet hum of power moving from one server to another, the sound of years of sacrifice solidifying into something unshakable. It had taken me almost 10 years to get here. 10 years since I'd walked out of that same house with nothing but a degree and a promise to myself. Back then, I was the difficult daughter, the one who didn't want to join Dad's real estate firm or ride Danielle's coattails into corporate comfort. I was the one who left home to chase something invisible, my own name, my own life, my own measure of success. It started small. A small logistics startup in Boston, then a tech firm in Austin, then another in Denver. I didn't buy companies. I built frameworks, strengthened their cores, and turned them into something profitable enough to merge and multiply. By 28, I had my first holding company. By 30, I had Orion. No investors, no family loans, no shortcuts, just a string of sleepless nights and deals that people said I was too young, too female, too ambitious to close. Every no I heard became a brick in the empire they couldn't see. And that was the point. No one was supposed to see it. Especially not my family. They thrived on hierarchy. Success was a game of visibility in their world. If you couldn't flaunt it, it didn't exist. But I learned early that true success is quiet. It doesn't shout. It whispers through signed contracts and closed doors. My phone buzzed again. It was Evelyn, my executive assistant. Claymore's CEO called 6 times. He's begging for an audience with you before tomorrow's board meeting. Should I schedule? I smiled to myself, imagining Mr. Clayton pacing his office, probably sweating through that overpriced suit he wore to dinner last night. Tell him I'm still in London, I typed. We'll meet soon enough. I stood and stretched, glancing around the garage one last time. Boxes, dust, old memories. This was where they thought I belonged, wedged between broken furniture and forgotten decorations. The family afterthought. The spare part. Not anymore. I opened my suitcase and pulled out the silk blouse I'd worn to close my first acquisition. Smooth, soft, and stronger than it looked like me. I slipped it on under the same thrift store sweater I'd worn to dinner last night. They'd never see it coming. That night, the house would be full again. Mr. Clayton was returning for the big Christmas Eve dinner, the one where Danielle would hold court, charming him with stories about her work ethic and ambition. The family would beam, proud to be in the orbit of someone so successful. But this time, the guest at the far end of the table wasn't the family failure. She was the owner. As I buttoned my blouse and tied my hair, I caught my reflection in the mirror nailed to the back wall. I didn't see the quiet, unassuming sister anymore. I saw the architect of an empire. And tomorrow morning, the people who once made me sleep in a garage would be begging for mercy in my boardroom. But first, I had dinner plans. By the time evening rolled around, the Lee family home smelled like roasted rosemary chicken, wine, and tension. The dining table gleamed polished silver, crystal glasses, a centerpiece of poinsettias that looked more expensive than they should have. My mother believed a shiny table could fix anything, even the cracks in our family. Danielle floated from guest to guest like a hostess straight out of a lifestyle magazine, her laugh sharp and glittering. Her husband Adam followed in her shadow, nodding in the right places, smiling when prompted. Across from me sat Mr. Clayton, the man who just hours ago became my employee without realizing it. He was older, self-assured, wearing his arrogance like a tailored suit. I took my seat at the far end of the table again, next to the kids' section, a familiar exile. I didn't mind. From here, I could see everyone clearly. Their hierarchy, their habits, their blindness. Mom was topping off Mr. Clayton's glass when she said, "We're so proud of Danielle's promotion. Junior Vice President of Operations, can you imagine?" She smiled sweetly at him. "Such a good mentor you've been." He laughed, swirling his wine. "She's earned it. The new merger with Orion Holdings has been a goldmine for us." I raised an eyebrow, resting my chin on my hand. "Orion Holdings?" Danielle beamed. "You've probably never heard of them, Maddie. They're huge. The CEO is this mystery woman. No photos, no interviews, no one knows her real name." Mr. Clayton nodded. "Whoever she is, she's brilliant. Ruthless in negotiations, but fair. She's transformed entire industries." "Sounds intimidating," my father chuckled, carving into the turkey. "Some women just aren't meant for that level of power." I smiled politely. "You'd be surprised, Dad." The conversation rolled on like an overproduced sitcom, everyone hitting their roles. Danielle bragged about the restructuring she'd led, cutting waste, saving millions. I knew the truth. Her changes had cost the company nearly $3 million in inefficiencies. I'd signed off on the audit myself. Halfway through dinner, Mr. Clayton's phone buzzed. He frowned and excused himself, stepping into the hallway. His voice carried back through the open archway. "Yes, I understand how important it is, but I can't get through to Mrs. CEO. I've left 6 messages." "What do you mean the board meeting's been moved up?" Danielle's posture stiffened, confusion flickering across her face. "We weren't notified," she whispered. Mom leaned in. "Oh dear, what's happening?" When Mr. Clayton returned, his smile had evaporated. Apparently, Orion's board has called an emergency session tomorrow morning. All department heads must attend. Danielle's fork clattered against her plate. "Tomorrow? But it's Christmas." "She doesn't care." "Mr." Clayton muttered, visibly sweating. "She's reviewing operational performance. I suggest everyone be prepared." I took a sip of my wine, letting the moment ripen. "It's 8 a.m., not 7, I said quietly, setting my glass down. "And don't bother bringing those reports, Danielle. I've already reviewed them." The room froze. All eyes turned toward me. Danielle blinked. "What are you talking about? You don't even work for Orion." I met her gaze steadily. "Actually, I do. Mr." Clayton's expression shifted from confusion to dawning panic. "Wait, what? What?" I straightened in my chair. my voice calm but carrying. Let me introduce myself properly. Madison Lee, CEO of Orion Holdings. You could have heard a fork drop. The silence was electric, thick with disbelief. Mom's mouth fell open, her hand trembling against her napkin. Danielle let out a strangled laugh, certain this was some elaborate joke. But when I pulled out my phone and projected my digital credentials onto the wall, the company logo, my title, my face, their laughter died in their throat. I don't understand, Mom whispered. I smiled. You don't have to. You just have to remember that the woman you mocked, pitied, and put in your garage owns everything you've built your pride on. Mr. Clayton looked pale. My God, he breathed. Danielle's voice cracked. This isn't real. Oh, it's very real, I said. And tomorrow morning, we're going to talk about integrity, performance, and accountability. The clock chimed softly in the background. They thought I was invisible, but I was sitting at the head of their empire, and the night was only getting started. For a few heartbeats, no one moved. The air in that dining room turned solid. My mother's fork slipped from her hand and clattered against the china. Dad's wine glass tilted, red spilling into the tablecloth like a wound. Madison, Danielle said finally, her voice brittle. You can't expect us to believe this. I don't expect anything, I replied softly, setting my phone on the table. The company seal of Orion Holdings glowed from the screen. I just thought you deserved to know who signs your paychecks. Mr. Clayton's complexion drained to paper white. You're the one who bought Claymore? The Madison Lee? I held his gaze. I am. He swallowed, voice trembling now. But the CEO's based in London. I smiled faintly. That's what I wanted everyone to think. Danielle's laughter was sharp and shaky. You're lying. You teach at a community college. You drive a Honda, I finished for her. Yes, one that I happen to enjoy driving. As for teaching, I guest lecture a few times a year because education matters more to me than image. Something you'd understand if you weren't allergic to humility. Mom blinked rapidly, as if trying to reframe reality. But you live in a small apartment. I own the building, I said quietly. And the bank that holds your mortgage. That landed like a thunderclap. Dad's mouth fell open, his pride dissolving into stunned silence. I turned toward Mr. Clayton, who looked ready to crawl under the table. About your quarterly projections, I said. They're off by 31 million. You've been using outdated forecasting models. We'll discuss that tomorrow at the board meeting. He nodded mutely, sweat glistening at his temples. Danielle pushed back from the table, her voice rising. You're trying to humiliate me. I looked at her, really looked at her. Perfect hair, perfect posture, the desperation underneath. No, I said evenly. You did that to yourself when you decided your worth came from status instead of substance. She glared at me, eyes bright with tears. She refused to let fall. You've been sitting there all these years, pretending to be less than you are. Why? Because I wanted to see who you were when there was nothing to gain, I said. And now I know. The room went completely still. Even the fireplace seemed to hush. I took a breath and let my voice steady. For years, you all looked at me like a failure. You dismissed me because I didn't fit your version of success. But while you were climbing ladders, I was building the building. While you chased approval, I learned peace. Mr. Clayton coughed weakly. Miss Lee Madison about tomorrow's meeting. I'll see you there, I said, gathering my phone. 8 a.m. sharp, bring your revised numbers. And Danielle, I added, looking back at her. You might want to double-check your expense reports. The board will. Her lips parted, color draining from her face. You wouldn't? I would, I said simply. Because accountability isn't cruelty, it's justice. Mom finally found her voice whispering. We didn't know, sweetheart. If we had, I stopped her with a gentle smile. You would have treated me differently. And that's exactly why I didn't tell you. I turned to leave, my chair legs scraping softly against the hardwood floor. Behind me, no one moved. At the doorway, I paused and glanced over my shoulder. Oh, and I won't be staying in the garage tonight. The Four Seasons has better insulation. The door shut behind me with a satisfying click, muffling the chaos that erupted inside. As I walked into the snowy night, the cold air hit my skin like freedom. My phone buzzed with notifications, apologies, missed calls, excuses. I ignored them all. Because tonight wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. But the real reckoning was still waiting for me in the boardroom. At dawn. The next morning, New York woke under a curtain of snow. I stood in front of the mirror in my suite at the Four Seasons, my suite tying the black silk bow at my blouse's collar. No makeup beyond a touch of mascara. Hair pulled back. Calm, collected, deliberate. It wasn't armor, it was declaration. At 7:50 a.m., I entered the boardroom on the top floor of Orion's headquarters. The long glass table gleamed under soft winter light. Around it sat 12 executives, including Mr. Clayton, pale and fidgeting, and Danielle, who looked like she hadn't slept. Her usual confidence had dissolved into nervous energy. Her shoulders were tense, her jaw set tight enough to crack enamel. I took my seat at the head of the table, the same position they'd denied me at every family gathering. "Good morning," I began. "Let's start with Claymore's quarterly review." Mr. Clayton cleared his throat, voice dry. "Yes, of course, Miss Lee." "Madison," I corrected softly. "Title don't interest me. Result do." He nodded, stumbling through the presentation graphs, projections, carefully worded excuses. The room smelled faintly of fear and coffee. I let him speak for exactly 7 minutes before interrupting. "Stop." Every head turned toward me. "These projections are wrong," I said. "The restructuring last quarter led by Miss Danielle Lee cost the company over $3 million in operational inefficiency. $3 million that vanished into unnecessary redundancies, misfiled vendor contracts, and overcompensation in marketing." Danielle's eyes went wide. "That's not true." "It's all in the audit," I said, sliding the report down the table. "And let's not forget the $12,000 in consulting dinners you charged to the company card. Care to explain that?" Her voice cracked. "Those were client meetings." I tilted my head. "Clients who don't exist?" A ripple of discomfort spread through the room. Mr. Clayton shifted in his chair. I leaned back, folding my hands. "This isn't about punishing anyone. It's about accountability. We rise by performance, not by proximity, not by last names." The silence that followed was heavy, the sound of fragile egos shattering. Danielle's voice came out small. "You're going to fire me." I looked at her for a long moment. "No," I said finally. "You're going to learn. Starting today, you'll report directly to Orion's HR transition team. They'll assess whether you can stay on after remediation. It's not a punishment, Danielle. It's an education." Her chin trembled. For the first time, I saw something unfamiliar in her humility. Or maybe just the start of it. Mr. Clayton cleared his throat. "And me?" "You'll stay through Q1, I said. After that, you can decide whether to resign or compete to remain. Consider this a chance to prove that leadership means integrity." He nodded slowly, defeated but grateful. I stood, gathering the papers. Meeting adjourned. "Enjoy your holidays. We'll reconvene January 5th. The executives filed out quietly, murmuring goodbyes tinged with respect. When the door closed, only Danielle and I remained. She stared at me, eyes red. "You really built all this, without anyone's help?" I nodded, because sometimes the people who love you the least teach you to stand the strongest. Her voice shook. "I don't know how to come back from this." "You start by telling the truth," I said gently. "To yourself first." I turned toward the window. Snow was falling harder now, blanketing the city in white, erasing everything, rewriting it. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation, the act of taking back not what I lost, but who I was. Because justice wasn't revenge. It was exposure. And for the first time in years, the truth finally felt like enough. The week that followed was the quietest storm I'd ever seen. No screaming headlines, no scandals splashed across the front page, just a slow, inevitable unraveling. Claymore's executives scrambled to stabilize what Danielle's shortcuts had nearly broken. Mr. Clayton resigned 3 days later, his farewell email full of gracious language and silent defeat. And my family? They retreated into the silence they'd once weaponized against me. Mom called first, her voice unsteady on the line. "We were shocked, sweetheart. You never told us you were running a company like that." I sipped my coffee, staring out at Central Park under its blanket of snow. "You never asked?" I said. "Dad sent an email next. Not an apology, more like a business memo disguised as regret. "We didn't realize you'd done so well. We're proud, of course. But did you really have to embarrass your sister?" That line made me laugh out loud. The kind of laugh that hurts your ribs. They still didn't get it. It wasn't about embarrassment. It was about truth. Danielle, on the other hand, said nothing. Her Instagram went dark, her corporate bio vanished, and for the first time in years, she wasn't posting about her promotions or her perfect marriage. She'd been suspended pending investigation. Though I'd made sure HR treated her fairly. I didn't want her destroyed, just confronted by the reality she'd spent her life running from. It's strange how justice feels. It's not fireworks or applause, it's quiet. It's waking up and realizing the weight you've been carrying isn't yours anymore. For the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of defending myself. I didn't need to prove anything now. I just was. On New Year's Eve, I got a message from Adam, Danielle's husband. "She's trying. I don't know if it's too late, but she's really trying." I typed back before I could stop myself. Good. Trying is how change starts. Days turned into weeks. My parents' friends stopped mentioning their successful daughter, Danielle. Their calls came less often, their tone softer when they did. I think they finally understood what Grandpa once told me when I was 16. Respect earned late is still respect earned. One night in January, as I was finishing a report, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it until I saw the message preview. "Maddie, it's me. I know I don't deserve to ask, but can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Danielle. I didn't respond right away. I walked to the window instead, watching the city lights flicker like a constellation of second chances. Somewhere out there, my sister was facing a version of herself she'd spent years hiding behind filters and promotions. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready to face the truth. But I also knew something else. Not every apology deserves immediate acceptance. Some wounds need silence before forgiveness. Still, I couldn't shake one thought. Maybe it wasn't about who had fallen or who had risen. Maybe it was about who had finally learned to stand. But one message made me realize there was still one thing left to fix. It was a gray February afternoon when I finally agreed to meet her. The kind of day when New York feels like it's holding its breath, snow melting into slush, the air damp with memory. She asked to meet at a small cafe in Soho, the same place we'd gone as teenagers when we used to share secrets over shared slices of cheesecake. I almost canceled twice before walking in. She was already there, sitting by the window. Gone were the polished curls, the sharp designer suit, the diamond jewelry that once glittered like armor. Danielle looked human, tired, stripped of performance. When she saw me, she stood, then froze, unsure whether to hug me or stay put. I made it easier and offered a small, calm nod. Hi, she whispered, sitting back down. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Finally, she said, "I didn't come here to beg for my job or to make excuses. She stopped, pressing her trembling hands together. "I needed to tell you I was wrong. About everything." I looked at her, searching her face for the old Danielle, the one who used to smirk across the dinner table when our parents compared us. She wasn't there anymore. "I spent my whole life trying to prove I mattered," she said, eyes shining. "To Mom, to Dad, to strangers on the internet. You didn't play that game, and I hated you for it. I told myself you were failing, because if you weren't, then I'd have to face that I was." Her voice cracked, and she laughed softly through it. "It's funny, isn't it? You built an empire and I built a mask. Yours outlasted mine." Something in my chest loosened, like a thread I'd been holding too tightly. "Danielle," I said quietly, "I never wanted to destroy you. I just couldn't keep pretending I was less so you could feel more." She nodded, wiping a tear. "I know, and I don't blame you. I would have done the same thing if I had your courage." "Oh?" The waitress came by with coffee we hadn't ordered. Danielle smiled weakly, murmured a thank you, and stirred it without drinking. After the audit, HR offered me a demotion. I took it. I'm working in operations support now. She laughed again, softer this time. "Turns out I'm actually good at fixing systems, not leading them. Guess that's karma with a sense of humor. I smiled faintly. Sometimes the best way to start over is at the bottom, when you finally stop pretending you're already at the top. She looked up, meeting my eyes for the first time in years. I miss you, Maddie. Not the competition. You. The words hit harder than I expected. I miss you too. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We just sat there, two sisters, with the weight of years between us, finally speaking like women instead of rivals. When I stood to leave, she reached into her bag and handed me a folded note. I found this while cleaning out Dad's office. It's from Grandpa. He wrote it the year before he died. Said to give it to you when you stopped hiding. I unfolded it right there at the table. Grandpa's handwriting sharp, steady, unmistakably his. To Madison. Success is quiet. Strength is silent. But truth should always be spoken, no matter how long it takes. When you stand without fear, even the ones who doubted you will find their reflection. By the time I looked up, Danielle was smiling through her tears. He always believed in you, she said. I just wish I had. I slipped the letter into my coat pocket. You still can, I said. As I walked out into the cold, I realized forgiveness wasn't something you gave once it was something you learned to live with. But I still had one more thing left, to do something Grandpa would have wanted. A year later, December returned soft snow swirling down Manhattan's avenues, store windows glowing gold. But this Christmas was different. The dinner table was mine this time, and not in the metaphorical sense. It stood in the open living room of my penthouse overlooking Central Park, warm light spilling across the oak floors. I'd kept it simple. No gold-plated silverware, no staff hovering. Just real plates, real laughter, real people. My parents sat together at one end, quieter than I'd ever seen them. Not broken, just gentler. Dad offered to carve the turkey. Mom brought her homemade stuffing instead of buying it from that overpriced deli she once bragged about. Small steps, but steps all the same. And Danielle, she arrived on time, wearing a wool sweater instead of couture, hair in a loose bun, cheeks pink from the cold. Beside her was Adam, holding a pie box from a neighborhood bakery. I watched them walk in hand, and for the first time in a decade, my chest didn't tighten. It eased. When dinner began, the conversation was hesitant but honest. No one performed. No one competed. We talked about real things, Ella's college applications, Mom's new volunteer work, the nonprofit Danielle had joined to help young women transition into tech careers. She laughed more freely now, without the brittle edge she used to have. Midway through the meal, she glanced around the room and said softly, "You know what's crazy? This feels like the first real Christmas we've ever had." I smiled, setting my fork down. Maybe it's because this time, nobody's pretending to be someone else. The words hung in the air, then dissolved into warm laughter. Even Dad chuckled. After dessert, I walked to the sideboard and picked up a small wrapped box. I handed it to Danielle. "For you," I said. She looked surprised. "I didn't get you anything." "You did," I said. "You showed up." She unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a silver compass engraved with the words, "Find your true north." She traced her thumb over it, eyes glistening. "You remembered Grandpa's quote." "Every word," I said. She nodded, then whispered, "I'm proud of you, Maddie. Not because of Orion, because you didn't let us break you." And there it was, the one thing I'd stopped waiting for. Now freely given. Not validation. Not apology. Understanding. Later that night, after everyone left, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows watching the city glow beneath the snow. A year ago, I left my parents' house humiliated, carrying nothing but quiet power and a phone full of unread messages. Tonight, that same silence felt sacred. It wasn't emptiness anymore, it was peace. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't something you owe the people who hurt you. It's the gift you give yourself when you're ready to stop reliving the pain. I poured a glass of wine, raised it toward the night sky, and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Grandpa. You were right, success is quiet, but peace is loud." The city lights shimmered like applause below. Sometimes the best revenge isn't making others see your worth, it's finally seeing it yourself.